My own aunt stood in court, holding an invoice for raising me, $50,000. But the judge's next words would expose a betrayal so deep, it shattered my entire past. My name is Althea, and I'm 26. Today, I'm a newly graduated nurse with big dreams. But just a few months ago, I was sitting in a courtroom, staring at the woman who was supposed to protect me, as she sued me for my own childhood expenses. It was devastating. 13 years earlier, my world had been filled with warmth. My mom, Amanda, raised me alone after my dad passed when I was 3. We didn't have much in our small 2-bedroom apartment, but Mom always made sure I never felt like we were struggling. She worked long shifts as a nurse, coming home with stories that planted the seed for my own dream to help people someday. Our weekends were sacred. We'd bake cookies, filling our tiny kitchen with the smell of vanilla and chocolate. Sundays were for the park or the library. Althea, she'd say, helping me with homework, education is the one thing nobody can take from you. Our walls were covered with my artwork and certificates. Mom kept every single one. For my 10th birthday, she gave me a children's medical kit. I carried it everywhere, listening to her heartbeat with a plastic stethoscope. You'll be wearing a real one someday, she'd beam, her eyes crinkling with pride. Our life wasn't perfect, but it was ours, full of gratitude and love. Everything changed the summer I turned 12. Mom started coming home exhausted, even more than usual. Then came the rapid weight loss, the persistent cough. I'd catch her wincing in pain, popping painkillers when she thought I was asleep. The day she finally went to the doctor, I waited at our neighbor's, Mrs. Thomas's, unable to focus. When Mom returned, her face told me everything. Stage 4 lung cancer. Terminal. 6 months to a year. Those words crashed into our happy little world like a wrecking ball. Mom tried to maintain normalcy, but our roles slowly reversed. I started making dinner, doing laundry, helping her to bed. I kept a notebook of her medication schedule, fiercely protective of her diminishing energy. School became secondary. My 12-year-old shoulders carried the weight of groceries, chores, and the creeping dread of what was coming. Friends stopped calling, but I didn't care. Every moment with Mom became precious, measured, finite. When Mom could no longer get out of bed, the hospice nurse started daily visits. I'd sit beside her, reading or just holding her increasingly frail hand. "You're so strong, Althea," she'd whisper. "Promise me you'll keep shining after I'm gone." On a quiet Tuesday morning, just 3 weeks after my 13th birthday, Mom took her last breath while I held her hand. The hospice nurse found me still sitting there an hour later, unable to let go. The world had never felt so empty, so vast, so terrifying. The funeral was a blur of black clothes and pitying looks. Then, Aunt Sophie appeared. My mother's younger sister had always been distant. Now, she stood beside me, hand on my shoulder, telling everyone how she'd take care of her poor orphan niece. The social worker met with Sophie and my elderly grandmother, who couldn't take me in. It was decided. I'd move in with Sophie, her husband Jack, and their daughter Cassidy. Sophie seemed caring in front of the social workers, promising a loving home. As I packed my childhood into boxes, I found a letter Mom had tucked into my favorite book. "Remember who you are, Althea. Life will throw storms your way, but you have the strength to weather them all. I'll love you always, even when you can't see me anymore." I folded that letter into my pocket, took one last look at our apartment, and stepped into my new life, unaware of the challenges awaiting me. The drive to Sophie's house took nearly 3 hours. Each mile increased the hollow feeling in my chest. Sophie and Uncle Jack lived in an impressive 2-story colonial. My cousin Cassidy, 15 and impossibly poised, greeted me with a rehearsed smile. Uncle Jack briefly welcomed me before returning to his home office. "This will be your room," Sophie said, opening a door at the end of the hallway. Stark white walls, basic secondhand furniture. Cassidy's room, I'd glimpsed, had pink walls and custom pieces. "We can add some color later, maybe," she added as an afterthought. That first night, Sophie prepared a special dinner. For a moment, I dared to hope. But the shift came gradually. By the end of my first week, Sophie presented me with house rules that didn't apply to Cassidy. Strict curfew, limited bathroom time, designated study hours, and a growing list of chores. In this house, everyone contributes, she explained, handing me a toilet brush. Meanwhile, Cassidy lounged by the pool, her chores mysteriously non-existent. Sophie had gone through my boxes, setting aside clothes she deemed too worn or inappropriate. We have standards in this neighborhood, Althea. You represent our family now. School was another adjustment. I was placed in standard classes despite my previous advanced programs. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. You've been through trauma. Best to take it easy. Sophie dismissed my concerns. The first time I truly understood my place was when school supplies were purchased. Cassidy received a new laptop, designer backpack, top-of-the-line everything. I got a plastic binder and dollar store pens. We have to be mindful of expenses, Sophie said. Your mother didn't leave much for your care. That night, I heard Sophie and Jack arguing. The Social Security checks barely cover the extra expenses, Sophie's voice carried. Do you know how much teenagers eat? How much their activities cost? She's family, Sophie, Jack replied, tired. Family that's costing us. Amanda always was irresponsible, not planning better for her daughter. I buried my face in my pillow, tears soaking through as I clutched Mom's letter. The money comments became regular. If I outgrew clothes, needed supplies, or ate what she deemed too much, I was reminded of the burden. Do you know how much braces cost? She muttered when the dentist recommended them. We left without scheduling the work. College applications are $70 each, she complained. Maybe community college would be more appropriate for your situation. Cassidy got a car for her 16th birthday. I was told to get a job. Cassidy's room was redecorated seasonally. My bedspread remained faded blue. Uncle Jack witnessed it all, but never challenged Sophie directly. Your aunt is under a lot of pressure, he'd say. Throughout it all, Mom's warmth became both comfort and torture. I closed my eyes, trying to remember her laugh, the feeling of her hand. Those memories sustained me through Sophie's coldness, Cassidy's casual cruelty, and the growing awareness that I wasn't wanted. I began spending more time at the school library, volunteering for any activity that kept me away from Sophie's critical gaze. I discovered that academic success could be a form of escape. If I couldn't have love, I could at least have achievement. One evening, while cleaning the kitchen, I accidentally knocked over Sophie's purse. As I gathered the spilled contents, I found a letter from the Social Security Administration addressed to Sophie as my guardian. It referenced monthly survivor benefits deposited for my care. The amount was substantial, far more than Sophie had implied. That night, I carefully replaced Mom's photo on my nightstand, the one Sophie had suggested I put away. I looked into Mom's smiling eyes and made a silent promise. I would endure, I would succeed, and someday I would escape. High school brought new challenges, but also opportunities. Despite Sophie's dismissal of my potential, I fought for honors classes. My science teachers noticed my aptitude. By sophomore year, I joined the Health Sciences Club. Another club meeting? Sophie would ask. I suppose you'll need money for that, too. I never asked for money anymore. I secured a part-time job at Sweet Blossom's Bakery. The owner, Mrs. Garcia, became a bright spot, slipping me extra pastries. My first paycheck felt like freedom until Sophie cornered me. Now that you're earning, you'll need to contribute to household expenses, she announced, hand extended. $300 monthly seems fair for room and board. It was nearly half my earnings, but I handed it over without argument. Fighting Sophie only made things worse. Later, I overheard her telling Uncle Jack she was teaching me financial responsibility by collecting rent. Cassidy, now a senior, made sure everyone knew I was her charity case cousin. She spread stories about Mom's death, embellishing details for maximum pity or mockery. When boys showed interest, she warned them about my unstable family background. One rainy Tuesday during junior year, I stayed late for a chemistry lab, missed the last bus, and resigned myself to a 3-mile walk in the downpour. A car pulled alongside me. Mrs. Jackson, my AP biology teacher, rolled down her window. Althea, get in before you drown. During the drive, She asked about my interest in medicine, my study habits, my plans. When she pulled up to Sophie's house, she hesitated. You know, you remind me of myself at your age, determined, focused despite obstacles. Something in her tone made me look up sharply. Mrs. Jackson smiled gently. My door is always open if you need to talk about anything. 2 weeks later, after Sophie confiscated half my paycheck for utilities I'd used excessively, I found myself in Mrs. Jackson's classroom during lunch. The words poured out, the financial manipulation, the emotional neglect, the Social Security letter. Mrs. Jackson listened without interruption, her expression growing increasingly troubled. Have you considered that your aunt may be misusing funds meant for your care? She finally asked. The thought had occurred to me, but hearing it from an adult gave it legitimacy. What can I do? I'm a minor. She's my guardian. Mrs. Jackson's reply changed everything. Start documenting. Keep records. And let's look into scholarship options that could get you out of there after graduation. With Mrs. Jackson's guidance, I began researching nursing scholarships obsessively. I volunteered at the local hospital, maintained perfect grades despite working 20 hours weekly. One evening, searching for a stapler, I discovered a folder labeled with my name. Inside were years of Social Security statements showing monthly deposits of over $1,000 for my care. Nearly $60,000 had been paid to Sophie since Mom's death. Yet I wore secondhand clothes, lacked basic school supplies, and was made to feel guilty for every morsel of food. I photographed the documents with trembling hands, then carefully replaced everything. That night, I emailed the photos to Mrs. Jackson and myself, creating evidence I hoped I'd never need to use. Senior year arrived with university applications and the quiet determination to escape Sophie's house forever. Mrs. Jackson helped me apply for every scholarship, editing my essays. When acceptance letters began arriving, Sophie intercepted them, presenting each with comments about student loans and unrealistic expectations. The breakthrough came in April, a full-ride nursing scholarship to State University, including housing, meals, and a stipend. When the thick envelope arrived, I raced to check the mail before Sophie could. I hid the letter under my mattress until I could fully read its contents. That night, I called Mrs. Jackson, my voice barely containing my excitement. I got it. I'm free. My high school graduation should have been a celebration. Instead, Sophie complained about the cost of my cap and gown. Cassidy rolled her eyes throughout Sophie's monologue. I scanned the audience for Sophie and Jack, but their section was empty. As I accepted my diploma, I heard a distinct cheer. There stood Mrs. Jackson alongside Mrs. Garcia, both clapping wildly. After the ceremony, Mrs. Jackson handed me a small gift bag. Inside was a professional stethoscope, just like my mother had used. The card read simply, "Your mother would be so proud of the woman you've become." I know I am. For the first time since Mom died, I felt seen, valued, and championed. Walking back to Sophie's house that day, diploma in hand, stethoscope in bag, I knew I was just weeks away from a new beginning. The day I moved into my college dorm felt like breathing fresh air after years underwater. My residence hall room was small, but it represented something priceless: independence. My roommate, Jasmine, arrived with her parents, who helped her unpack and hang fairy lights. They offered to help me, but my entire life fit into 2 suitcases and a backpack. Sophie had dropped me off at the campus entrance. "When you're settled," she'd said, "already putting the car in drive, and remember, your scholarship doesn't cover holiday breaks. We'll need to discuss compensation if you plan to stay with us during those times." Jasmine and I became fast friends. When she realized I never received calls or packages, she began sharing hers without comment. "My mom always sends too much anyway," she'd say. University life demanded intense focus. The nursing program was rigorous. I thrived under pressure, remembering Mom's dedication. To cover expenses not included in my scholarship, I worked at the campus coffee shop and took weekend shifts at an assisted living facility. I barely had time to think about Sophie, which was exactly how I wanted it. The less contact, the better. Still, holiday breaks loomed. Before Thanksgiving freshman year, Sophie called with expectations. Since you're not contributing financially anymore, we'll need compensation for your stay. $300 for the week seems fair. Food isn't free, Althea. I swallowed hard, calculating extra shifts. Jasmine, overhearing, waited until I hung up. Come home with me instead. My parents would love to have you. That Thanksgiving became the first of many holidays spent with Jasmine's family. The Parkers welcomed me without question. When Sophie called on Christmas asking when I'd arrive with my room and board payment, I informed her I'd made other arrangements. Her surprised pause was followed by concern, not for my well-being, but for the lost income. Spring semester brought new challenges and opportunities. I was accepted into an accelerated program. During a career fair, I met David, a medical student. Tall, with kind eyes and quiet confidence, he struck up a conversation. Before long, we were meeting for coffee, talking for hours. My dad's a surgeon, David explained. He expected me to follow in his footsteps, but I'm interested in family practice in underserved communities. We've been at odds about it for years. His understanding of family pressure created a bond between us. When I finally shared the full story of Sophie's treatment, he listened without judgment, then asked the question that had hovered in my mind for years. Have you considered that what she did might be illegal? Social Security benefits for surviving children are meant to provide for the child, not supplement the guardian's income. During spring break of my sophomore year, instead of visiting Jasmine's family, I stayed on campus to research. The nearly empty library became my second home as I dug through legal websites. What I discovered left me stunned. Guardians misappropriating survivor benefits could face serious legal consequences, including fraud charges. I made an appointment with the university's legal aid office, bringing copies of the Social Security statements I'd photographed. The student attorney who reviewed my case looked increasingly serious. This isn't just unethical, he said. It's potentially criminal. Your aunt had a fiduciary responsibility to use those funds for your direct benefit. What are my options? I asked, heart-pounding. You could file a complaint, possibly pursue recovery of funds, but that would mean legal action against your aunt. It's a big step. Think about it carefully. I left with resources, but no clear decision. That night, I called Mrs. Jackson. You don't have to decide anything right now, she advised. Focus on your education. Document everything. The statute of limitations gives you time. Junior year brought clinical rotations that cemented my passion. Working with actual patients, especially children, reminded me daily why I'd chosen this path. My professors praised my combination of technical skill and compassion. David and I grew closer, supporting each other. When he invited me to meet his parents over summer break, I accepted with only slight trepidation. Unlike Sophie, Dr. and Mrs. Hoffman welcomed me warmly. Althea has the highest GPA in the nursing program, David announced proudly over dinner. Dr. Hoffman toasted, "The world needs more providers like you too." The contrast between David's family and Sophie couldn't have been starker. That night, lying in their comfortable guest room, I finally allowed myself to acknowledge the full extent of Sophie's betrayal. It wasn't just about money. It was about denying me the love and support a child deserves after losing their only parent. As graduation approached, job offers came in. I accepted a position at Children's Memorial Hospital in the pediatric intensive care unit. 2 weeks before graduation, David proposed during a picnic at the campus lake. Yes, absolutely yes. Life was finally taking shape according to my own design, not Sophie's restrictions or limitations. As I prepared for my new job, for a future with David, I believed the chapter with Sophie was closed. I was wrong. My graduation day dawned bright and clear, symbolic of my new beginning. Jasmine and I helped each other into our caps and gowns. The Parkers arrived with flowers and hugs. David and his parents came with a gift bag, a beautiful new lab coat with Althea Marshall RN embroidered on the pocket. As we gathered, I spotted an unexpected trio, Sophie, Uncle Jack, and Cassidy, all in their public appearance outfits. Sophie's smile was wide, but didn't reach her eyes. "We wouldn't miss our Althea's big day," she announced loudly, placing possessive emphasis on our. She air-kissed my cheeks, whispering, "We need to talk after the ceremony." Throughout the graduation, I could feel Sophie's gaze. When my name was called, I heard her voice rise above others. That's my niece. I raised her after her mother died. The ceremony concluded. As graduates dispersed, Sophie intercepted me. We brought you a graduation gift, she said, pressing a thick envelope into my hands. Open it now. Inside was not a card, but an invoice meticulously itemized on Sophie's personal stationery. The heading read, Expenses incurred in raising Althea Marshall, 2012 to 2017. Room and board, clothing, school supplies, medical expenses, transportation. The total, circled in red pen, $50,000. What is this? I asked, my voice barely audible. A reality check, Sophie replied, her smile never wavering for the benefit of onlookers. Now that you're officially an adult with a career, it's time to repay what you owe. We made many sacrifices to provide for you after your mother's irresponsibility left you with nothing. Uncle Jack looked uncomfortable, but remained silent. Cassidy smirked. I don't owe you anything, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The government sent you money every month specifically for my care. Sophie's smile tightened, barely enough to cover basics. This bill reflects additional expenses. We expect monthly payments, beginning with your first nursing paycheck. Before I could respond, David appeared at my side, sensing the tension. Everything okay here? I introduced him briefly, watching Sophie's expression shift as she noted his confident posture and expensive watch. Just a family matter, Sophie said smoothly. Althea understands her obligations. That evening, surrounded by the Parkers, Hoffmans, and friends at a celebration dinner, I tried to push Sophie's invoice from my mind. David, sensing my distraction, squeezed my hand. Whatever it is, we'll figure out together, he whispered. 3 days later, an official-looking letter arrived at my new apartment. A law firm, representing Sophie Marshall, was demanding payment of $50,000 for care and support, threatening legal action if a payment plan wasn't established within 30 days. Panic seized me. I called David, who immediately connected me with his father. Dr. Hoffman recommended a lawyer friend specializing in family law. Don't respond to anything yet, he advised. Let's get professional guidance first. Marcus Wright's law office was modest but neat. After reviewing Sophie's invoice and the legal letter, he leaned back in his chair, puzzled. This is unusual. Guardians typically don't sue former wards for basic care expenses, especially when they've received government benefits. He studied me thoughtfully. There's something more going on here. Tell me everything about your time with your aunt. For the next 2 hours, I detailed life with Sophie, the constant reminders of my cost, the different treatment, the discovery of Social Security statements, her increasing demands for money once I began working. Marcus took extensive notes. I'll take your case, he said, and I don't think you'll owe your aunt a dime when we're done. The next weeks were a flurry of legal preparation. Marcus filed a counterclaim. He also submitted requests for financial records related to my mother's estate and any benefits received on my behalf. During this process, we uncovered surprising information. My mother had maintained a modest life insurance policy, naming me as beneficiary. The funds should have been placed in trust for my benefit. Additionally, there was a small inheritance from my maternal grandparents I'd never been informed about. Where did this money go? I asked Marcus. That's exactly what we need to find out, he replied. Your aunt had legal obligations as your guardian to manage these assets in your best interest. 2 months after Sophie's initial demand, we received notice of a court date. The lawsuit was moving forward, Sophie seeking the full $50,000 plus legal fees. Marcus seemed oddly pleased. Now we'll have discovery, he explained. Legal power to demand financial records she might otherwise withhold. Through formal requests, Marcus obtained bank statements, tax returns, and benefit records from Sophie's accounts. What they revealed was shocking. Not only had Sophie received monthly Social Security survivor benefits of over $1,000, but she had also collected the life insurance payout and inheritance money. The total amount that should have been used for my care or held in trust, nearly $190,000. She spent all of it, Marcus said grimly, reviewing the financial analysis. And now she's suing you for more. How is that possible? I asked, staring at the figures. How could she legally take all that money? She couldn't. That's the point. Marcus began organizing documents. Your aunt didn't just fail to provide adequately for you using funds specifically designated for that purpose. She potentially committed fraud. As our court date approached, I struggled to balance preparation for the case with starting my new job. David provided unwavering support. The night before the trial, I couldn't sleep. Memories of my mother flooded back. "I'm trying to be strong, Mom," I whispered to her memory. "I hope you be proud of who I've become despite everything." The next morning, I dressed carefully. David drove me to the courthouse where Marcus waited. "Ready?" he asked. Taking a deep breath, I nodded. "Ready." The county courthouse was an imposing brick building. David and Jasmine flanked me, their presence providing silent strength. Across the corridor, Sophie, Uncle Jack, and Cassidy sat with their attorney. Sophie had dressed in a cream suit that screamed respectable citizen. When our eyes briefly met, she gave me a small, confident smile that sent chills down my spine. "All these years," I whispered to David. She made me feel like I was taking food from her table. "And all that time." "Don't focus on her," Marcus advised, overhearing. "Today is about facts, not feelings. Let the evidence speak." At 9:30, the bailiff called our case. Judge Harriet Woodson, an African-American woman in her 60s with silver-streaked hair and penetrating eyes, nodded briskly as we took our places. "I've reviewed the filings in this case," she began. "Mrs. Sophie Marshall is suing her niece Althea Marshall for reimbursement of child-rearing expenses in the amount of $50,000 plus legal fees. Miss Althea Marshall has filed a counterclaim. Let's proceed with opening statements." Sophie's attorney approached the bench. His voice was smooth as he painted Sophie as a selfless relative who stepped in after tragedy. "Your Honor, my client opened her home and her heart when her sister tragically passed away, leaving a 13-year-old daughter with no resources. For 5 years, the Marshalls provided food, shelter, clothing, and emotional stability." He gestured dramatically towards Sophie, who adopted an expression of saintly patience. "They did this without complaint, despite the significant financial burden. Now that Miss Althea Marshall has secured lucrative employment, my client simply asks for reasonable compensation." Marcus took notes, his expression neutral. When his turn came, he approached the bench with calm confidence. "Your Honor, this case isn't about compensation for childcare expenses. It's about accountability for funds that were specifically designated for Althea Marshall's care following her mother's death. Funds that were substantial and more than adequate." Judge Woodson leaned forward. "You're referring to survivor benefits?" "Yes, Your Honor, and more. We have documentation showing Mrs. Sophie Marshall received Social Security survivor benefits, life insurance proceeds, and inheritance funds totaling nearly $190,000 that should have been used exclusively for Althea's care or held in trust for her future." A small murmur ran through the courtroom. Sophie's composed facade cracked. "That's a serious allegation, Counselor," Judge Woodson noted. "I'll need to see that documentation. Let's proceed with testimony." Sophie took the stand first, describing how she'd rescued me. She detailed the sacrifices, Cassidy sharing her home, family vacations curtailed, the emotional labor of helping a grieving teenager adjust. Her attorney dramatically presented her itemized invoice. "And did the Social Security benefits you received cover these expenses?" he asked. Sophie shook her head solemnly. "Not even close. The monthly benefit barely covered her food. Everything else came from our pocket." When Marcus rose for cross-examination, his approach was methodical. He established Sophie as my legal guardian, responsible for managing any assets for my welfare. Then, he began introducing exhibits, bank statements showing regular deposits from Social Security, documents regarding Mom's life insurance, and records of my grandparents' inheritance. "Mrs. Marshall, can you explain why you're claiming financial hardship when records show you received over $3,000 monthly designated specifically for Althea's care?" Sophie shifted uncomfortably. "That's not accurate. The Social Security was much less." Marcus presented another document. "This statement from the Social Security Administration confirms monthly payments of $1,000 $235 paid to you as Althea's guardian. Additionally, you received a lump sum life insurance payment of $65,000 and inheritance funds of $15,000, both legally required to be used for Althea's benefit. Where do these funds go? Sophie's composure crumbled further. There were many expenses. Household costs increased substantially. We had to move to a larger home to accommodate her. Mrs. Marshall, Marcus continued, during the 5 years Althea lived with you, these funds totaled approximately $190,000. Yet you provided her with second-hand clothes, denied her orthodontic care, made her work to pay for her own basic needs, and now claim she owes you an additional $50,000. Can you explain this discrepancy? Sophie's attorney objected repeatedly, but Judge Woodson allowed most of Marcus's questions, her expression growing increasingly concerned as Sophie's answers became more evasive. By the way, if you're still with me, make sure to hit subscribe. More unbelievable stories like this are coming. When it was my turn to testify, I focused on facts rather than emotions. The different treatment compared to Cassidy, being required to pay rent for my part-time job, the lack of support for educational expenses, and the discovery of the benefit statements. Sophie's attorney attempted to paint me as ungrateful. Wasn't it generous of the Marshalls to take you in? Don't you think you owe them something for the roof over your head for 5 years? Before I could answer, Judge Woodson interrupted. Counsel, the question of whether a minor child owes a legal guardian for basic necessities is inappropriate. The guardian voluntarily accepted legal responsibility along with the benefits provided for the child's care. The judge called a brief recess. When court resumed, she had reviewed all the financial documentation. I've seen enough, Judge Woodson announced, removing her reading glasses. Mrs. Marshall, would you please approach the bench? Sophie rose shakily. Her earlier confidence evaporated. Mrs. Marshall, as Althea's legal guardian, you had a fiduciary duty to use all funds designated for her care, either to provide for her immediate needs or to preserve them for her future. The evidence presented today suggests you did neither. The judge shuffled through the documents, her voice stern. You received approximately $190,000 meant for Althea's benefit. Based on your own testimony and the evidence presented, it appears these funds were commingled with your personal accounts and used primarily for your family's expenses, not Althea's. Sophie attempted to interrupt, but Judge Woodson held up her hand. I'm not finished. Not only did you apparently misappropriate these funds, but you've now had the audacity to sue your niece for additional money, claiming expenses that should have been more than covered by the benefits you received. She turned to address the entire courtroom, her voice ringing with authority. I am dismissing Mrs. Marshall's claim with prejudice. Furthermore, I am referring this case to the District Attorney's Office for investigation into potential misuse of Social Security benefits and breach of fiduciary duty. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. David squeezed my hand so tightly it almost hurt. Jasmine wiped tears from her eyes. Judge Woodson continued. Miss Althea Marshall, you have the right to pursue civil recovery of misappropriated funds if you wish. My clerk will provide information on that process should you decide to proceed. With a final bang of her gavel, it was over. Sophie stood frozen by the bench, her face ashen. Uncle Jack stared at the floor. As we exited the courtroom, Marcus smiled broadly. Congratulations. That couldn't have gone better. What happens now? I asked, still processing the judge's words. That's up to you, Marcus replied. You could pursue recovery of the funds, but that would mean another legal battle. Or you can consider this closed and move forward with your life. David put his arm around my shoulders. Whatever you decide, you're not alone. Looking back at Sophie being consoled by her attorney, I felt no triumph. Only a profound sadness for what might have been. But I also felt something else, freedom. Freedom from the guilt and obligations Sophie had burdened me with for years. Outside the courthouse, standing in the bright sunlight, I made my decision. I don't want their money. I just want to close this chapter and start my own life. Marcus nodded understandingly. Sometimes the victory that matters most isn't financial. It's the truth being recognized. As we walked down the courthouse steps, I noticed a familiar figure waiting. Mrs. Jackson. My high school teacher and mentor had come to support me. Her presence was the final validation I needed, a reminder that true family isn't always defined by blood. The days following the trial brought a strange mixture of emotions: relief, vindication, lingering sadness, and a new sense of freedom. David drove me home in thoughtful silence. Jasmine and the Parkers had organized a small gathering at my apartment. As friends shared food and quiet conversation, I slipped onto my small balcony for a moment alone. The setting sun cast long shadows. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. "This isn't over. Family doesn't treat family this way." I stared at the message, recognizing the bitter irony. Family doesn't treat family the way she had treated me, as a financial transaction, a burden, an obligation, rather than a personal love. For the first time, I deleted her message without guilt. David joined me on the balcony, wrapping his jacket around my shoulders. "You okay?" "I think I will be," I answered. "Honestly, it's just a lot to process." The following morning, I began my first official shift at Children's Memorial Hospital. Walking through those doors wearing scrubs and my mother's pearl earrings felt like fulfilling a promise made long ago. The pediatric intensive care unit was challenging but rewarding. My supervisor, Nurse Karen, took me under her wing. "You have a natural way with the children," she observed. "Some nurses take years to develop that kind of connection." I didn't tell her about my own childhood losses. Not yet. Those wounds were still healing. Instead, I channeled my experiences into empathy for my patients and their families. 2 weeks after the trial, Uncle Jack called. His voice sounded tired, defeated. "Althea, I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but I wanted you to know I had no idea about the extent of what Sophie was doing. The Social Security? Yes, but not the life insurance or inheritance. You still let her treat me like a burden," I replied, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice. "You watched it happen every day for 5 years and did nothing." His heavy sigh carried through the phone. "You're right. My passivity makes me complicit. I should have protected you, and I failed. I'm sorry, though I know that's inadequate." After a long pause, he added, "Sophie and I are separating." The trial was a wake-up call about who she really is and who I've allowed myself to become by standing by. I just wanted you to know. I felt no satisfaction in their marriage's collapse, only a complicated sadness for the family that might have been mine, but never truly was. "I hope you find peace, Uncle Jack." "I really do." That conversation marked the last direct contact with Sophie's household. Through mutual connections, I learned the district attorney had decided not to pursue criminal charges, but had required Sophie to complete financial management courses and community service. Cassidy occasionally sent hostile messages on social media, which I eventually solved by blocking her accounts. As summer turned to fall, I established routines in my new life. Challenging but fulfilling shifts at the hospital. Quiet evenings with David, planning our future. Weekend brunches with Jasmine and friends. My apartment slowly transformed from a sterile space to a true home. One September afternoon, I received an unexpected email from the hospital's Human Resources Department. A trust fund had been established in my mother's name to provide scholarships for nursing students from single-parent households. The anonymous donor had requested I serve on the committee. The attached documentation revealed the trust had been funded with exactly $50,000, the amount Sophie had demanded from me. A separate note from the hospital's legal department confirmed the donation had come from Uncle Jack. That evening, I called Mrs. Jackson to share the news. "It sounds like his way of making amends," she observed, "not erasing the past, but trying to create something positive from it." "Should I accept the committee position?" I asked. "Part of me wants nothing to do with anything connected to that family." "Consider this," she replied thoughtfully. "The committee position isn't about them. It's about honoring your mother and helping students who share your experience. Don't let Sophie take that opportunity from you too." Her wisdom always cut through my confusion. The following day, I accepted the position, my first small step toward transforming pain into purpose. As my first year of professional nursing progressed, I found myself increasingly drawn to working with children from difficult home situations. Their resilience reminded me of my own journey. The hospital's social worker noticed my connection and invited me to join a support program for children in foster care or kinship guardianship. David supported my growing involvement, often accompanying me to events. His medical residency was demanding, but we carved out time for our relationship, planning a small wedding for the following spring. The Parkers and Hoffmans had essentially adopted me into their families, providing the loving support network I'd missed for so many years. 6 months after the trial, on my mother's birthday, I finally felt ready to visit her grave. David offered to come, but this was a journey I needed to make alone. The cemetery was peaceful. I placed fresh flowers, then sat on the grass to tell her everything. My nursing career, the truth about Sophie, finding love with David, the scholarship fund now bearing her name. "I survived, Mom," I whispered, tears flowing freely. "Not just survived, but found my way to thrive. I think you'd be proud of that." On the drive home, I made a detour to visit Mrs. Thomas, our former neighbor. Now in her 80s, she welcomed me with surprised delight. Her walls still displayed photographs of her own children and grandchildren. And there, on a crowded shelf, stood a small framed picture of my mother and me at a long-ago birthday party. "She was so proud of you," Mrs. Thomas recalled, following my gaze. "Always said you had her compassion, but twice her determination. Looks like she was right." These small reconnections with my past helped stitch together the fragmented narrative of my life. Each conversation, each memory shared by those who had known my mother, added another thread to the tapestry of my identity, separate from Sophie's distortions and manipulations. As my healing progressed, I began seeing a therapist specializing in family trauma. Dr. Lynn helped me understand that Sophie's treatment hadn't been my fault, that children aren't responsible for earning their guardian's love or care. Gradually, the nightmares decreased. The anxiety attacks became less frequent, and the reflexive guilt over costing too much began to fade. The hardest part of healing, Dr. Lynn observed, is accepting that some people who should have loved us were incapable of doing so. Their limitation doesn't diminish your worthiness. Those words became a mantra during difficult moments. A reminder that Sophie's coldness reflected her character, not my value. 1 year after the trial, I received an unexpected package. Inside was my mother's nursing pin from her graduation, along with several photographs I thought lost forever. A brief note from Uncle Jack explained he'd found them while moving to his new apartment. That small brass pin became a talisman I carried in my pocket during difficult shifts, a tangible connection to the woman whose love had shaped me far more profoundly than Sophie's neglect ever could. Life continues to unfold in ways both expected and surprising. David and I married in a simple ceremony surrounded by chosen family. We're saving for a house where we can build the warm, supportive home neither of our childhoods fully provided. My career advances steadily with a recent promotion to charge nurse in the pediatric unit. The scholarship fund in my mother's name has already helped 3 students pursue nursing degrees. Each recipient reminds me of myself a few years ago, carrying invisible burdens while working toward a future built on service to others. Looking back at the journey from that terrified 13-year-old girl clutching her mother's letter to the woman I am today, I recognize the profound truth that has emerged from all the pain. Family isn't defined by blood or legal documents. It's created through love, respect, and mutual support. Qualities Sophie never understood, but that I found in abundance with the people who've chosen to walk alongside me. The judge's words in that courtroom did more than dismiss Sophie's lawsuit. They validated my worth and right to be treated with dignity. But the real victory wasn't legal. It was learning that despite everything, I remained capable of trust, love, and connection. Sophie took my childhood, but she couldn't take my future or my capacity for joy. If you're watching this and struggling with family who treats you as a burden rather than a blessing, please know your worth isn't determined by their limitations. True family sees your value without calculating your cost. Sometimes we have to create that family for ourselves, building connections based on mutual respect rather than obligation. Have you ever had to choose your own family or fight for what was rightfully yours? Tell me your story in the comments below. I really want to know what you think.